You're gonna make it? Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Kimberly Fuller. I'd like to welcome you to the HR for Health webinar, Leave It to Us, your HR guide to paid and unpaid leave. Understanding how to classify time off can be confusing, especially when you add in disability and pregnancy leave. What should be your office policy? And more importantly, what are the federal and state regulations that you need to follow? If you have questions as we go along, please enter them into the Q&A box. We are so lucky to have Ali Oromchian. He is the co-founder of HR for Health. He'll be presenting for you this evening. HR for Health is a cloud-based human resources software designed to simplify human resources for healthcare practices. So here we go. I will turn it over to you, Ali. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kim. Welcome everyone on this Tuesday night. We are going to be talking about something that we get a lot of questions about, which is time off and leave. You know, both paid leave and also unpaid leave. And you know, this topic is really interesting because it is the foundation of a lot of HR questions in your practice. And this was true long before COVID ever happened, but it's become that much more important. So we wanted to clarify some of the rules and some of the obligations that you may have, make sure that everyone's on the same page as we sort of get going. And this is a little bit like a Lego piece, if you will, or a Lego puzzle that you'd be putting together. And the reason I say that is because I don't know if you've had this experience before, but if you ever open up a Lego puzzle and you've got this bag full of pieces and you go through it and you try to put it all together with the instructions, every once in a while there'll be a piece that seems missing, right? And you get all frustrated because you can't move on in putting together this this puzzle until you find that one piece of the Legos, and it can be pretty frustrating if you've ever done it yourself, or if you have a child to do it, because at the end of the day you expect that puzzle or that piece to be in that puzzle bag. And leave is a lot like a missing Lego. I say that is because a lot of employees expect you to have in your employment manual. They expect you to give them time off to rest and relax and spend time with their families. And when it's not in your employment manuals, it's not something is talked about, when it's not something that's encouraged, it does create a lot of stress amongst the employees, and that stress kind of emanates itself in different ways in your practice. They're maybe not as kind and nice and cordial with the patients. They may not be as understanding and patient with
Ali.
the
Hey, Ali,
oh, yeah,
can you hear me? Hey,
yes.
I'm so sorry. We are definitely having a lot of issues hearing you. I'm wondering
I can hear you.
maybe, okay, we're having trouble hearing you. I'm wondering maybe if we turn off the video, maybe the audio will come through and not the video. So let's give that a try, because I know all of these wonderful people want to hear what you're saying. They're dying to hear it. So let's give it a try with no video.
Okay, I just turned off the video. Is that okay? Does that work?
Seems better to me. Yeah, great.
Okay. All right, everyone. Sorry about the delay there. Yeah, I know we've been having some trouble with GoToWebinar for a while, but it seems like this is continuing. So let's see if this works. So what I was saying in terms of the Lego pieces is that not having these leaves set in stone really can be frustrating for your team members, and that's what we need to avoid, right? We want to make sure we are avoiding causing this stress, because the teams do expect to see this in the employment manuals. They do expect to see it in your offices. And so the reason why a lot of people don't have these kinds of leaves in there is because they expect, or you maybe expect, that you have to pay for all these leaves and that it's a requirement. but the reality is that it's not necessarily a requirement. So that's what we're going to go through today, and we're going to eliminate that stress for all of you. So for those of you that don't know me, I am a dental attorney, and we work on all different facets of healthcare law as well. We work with dentists, optometrists, veterinarians, and other physicians in the areas of transitions, buying and selling dental practices, employment law, estate planning as well. And so I'm bringing you sort of a unique perspective in that regard. Now, here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about paid time off. Then we're going to talk about paid holidays. Then we're going to talk about family leave, as many states have kind of come up with their own rules. And then we're going to talk about pregnancy and disability leave as well. So as a gift, like I always do when we are, when we do these presentations, I'd like to give you guys something to take home with you. And so if you would like a document that we've created, a white paper that we've created regarding the required leaves broken down by state, then let me know. Go ahead, well, don't let me know, but go ahead and text the word paid or unpaid, one word, to the number 44222, and you'll get that in your email box. And so make sure you do that again, paid or unpaid, to 44222, and it'll break down all the required leaves that you need to have in your state. And so it's a really great document for all of you to reference, throughout the country. So let's begin by talking about paid time off. Okay, so paid time off, goes by a couple of different names. It is, it could go by PTO. Some people kind of mistake it for vacation as well, although we'll talk about that. But paid time off is a little bit different than some of those things. But let's go through it. So how you determine what somebody gets in terms of paid time off really comes down to a couple of different things. One is how much can you afford? And that depends on sort of where you are in your life cycle of your practice. Are you a new office that just started up? Are you an existing practice? Are you someone who just bought a practice and you're trying to follow in the footsteps of the seller? So you have a lot of options, and depending on where you are in your career, paid time off can vary. For many people who are doing brand new offices, meaning you're just building a new office and you're starting from scratch, there isn't much paid time off provided to employees. In fact, there's almost no paid time off provided to employees, other than the federal required ones, because the office can't afford it, and that's okay. That's okay. And after a few years, sometimes between 3 to 5 years, as the office grows and there's a lot more profitability, then different kinds of paid time off can be provided. So what are the offerings? Well, there's a couple. There's vacation. Vacation is one kind of paid time off that you can provide to your employees, and that is, that just like it sounds like, is any amount of time that you deem appropriate to provide your team. There's no rule or law that says you have to provide a week or 3 days or 2 weeks. You can come up with any number that you're comfortable with. We usually recommend that you break it down by the number of years someone has served in your office. And so, a lot of times, people will give no paid vacation for someone who, has been with you for 1 year or less. And then on their 1 year anniversary, they get a couple of days. And then on their second or third year anniversary, they get some more days. And then at some point, they are sort of, tapped out or maxed out on how much vacation they get. So usually it's anywhere from 5 to 10 days, worth of vacation time that you can provide. The other option, in addition to vacation, is something called PTO, which also stands for paid time off, of course. But PTO is sort of a mixture of vacation and sick leave combined. So instead of having two different kinds of leave, you are just giving them some PTO time. That is my personal favorite, quite honestly, for a lot of reasons, but primarily because I don't like to be lied to under really any circumstances. It actually destroys any trust I have in the person who I'm speaking to whether it's a white lie or it's more substantial. And so I kind of avoid all of that by providing PTO or recommending PTO, because the reality is that it doesn't really matter why an employee is not in your office. If they're not in your office, they could be, vacationing, in the Caribbean, going to Disneyland, or God forbid, being sick at home. They're not in your office. So as a business person, it doesn't really matter. They're not there, and so you have to find a replacement. So why expose yourself to a situation where maybe the employee has run out of vacation time, but they still want to go on vacation, so now they want to use their sick leave and they have to pretend like they're sick. It just doesn't make anyone feel good. So in my view, I would prefer to just give paid time off and let people act as adults and sort of use it as they deem necessary. So that's why I recommend it. A lot of folks do, for the reasons I'm going to mention in a few minutes, are do discuss sort of separating vacation versus sick time for reasons that we'll talk about. But I think if for simplification purposes, if you want to just have a simplified system, people know how much time they have, they don't have to kind of make up stories about why they're not in the office and whatnot. PTO is really wonderful and kind of can really help in that sense. Now, one of the questions we usually get is, I'm really unsure about what to offer, and I don't know what to offer. I don't know how long to offer it for. Is it good enough for my team? And the reality is that you have to do an analysis with your CPA, and maybe if you don't have a CPA, doing it sort of yourself, in terms of how much can you afford. And the reason I say that is because you have to remember, when you are giving PTO or vacation to your employees, they of course are going to get paid for that time that they're not there, but you also will have to find a replacement. So depending on who you give it to, and how much time you give them, well, you may have to replace that hygienist who is going on PTO or on vacation, and that that can end up being costly to you, especially if you're giving if you're being very generous to it. So it's important to do some calculations and figure out really how much you can how much you can afford and how much you can't before deciding how much to give. And remember, unless you're buying someone else's practice and the seller already has sort of a set schedule of benefits like that, you can create your own. Now, I'm not saying that if you buy a practice you can't set your own, and you probably should, but you have to also be careful on not ruining the goodwill with the employees that you have, because at the end of the day, they are a major reason why you bought the practice as well. And so kind of think about that. So in sum, there are many factors which, with regard to which benefits work best for your practice. You got to look at your size, you got to look at the feasibility of it, and determine kind of what makes sense for you. And as you calculate the cost of what you're offering to all of your employees versus your financial state and needs, it's something that you can strive to achieve, right? And a lot of employees understand that, especially when you're just first getting started. And by the way, this, along with a lot of other things that we're going to talk about in a second, are benefits that you can provide to only your full-time employees. And so, and by the way, you get to define who is full-time and who is not. So, if you want to only provide that to employees who are working, let's say 40 hours in the week, then you define that in your employment manual, and you should be good to go. And that means anyone who works less than 40 hours a week would not get this benefit, of vacation or PTO, or other benefits as well that we'll talk about in a second. Now, let's talk about paid sick leave. Now, paid sick leave is a little bit different. So paid sick leave is something that started a few years ago, probably I think about 5 or 6 years ago. It became really popular for states to mandate paid sick leave for their employees, for the employees that are in their states. So California, Massachusetts, and one other state, I always forget, I think it's Pennsylvania, but I might be wrong. started, these paid sick leave laws, and then this kind of ballooned to other states, and now other states are kind of providing their own rules. And just for the fun of it, some counties and even some cities have gone in on the fun. And so, you could be, for example, in California, and you have the California paid sick leave laws, and then you could be in a county that has its own paid sick leave laws, and then within that county you could have a city that also has its own sick leave laws. It's a little bit too much and ridiculous, but the reality is that it is something that has grown around the country. So it's very important for you to keep in mind this. Paid sick leave is not something that is optional. In many states, paid sick leave is required to be provided to your employees. And the reason is because the state wanted employees to have time off when they're sick to go to the doctors, and not skip on that or be unpaid for it. And so that was, I think, something that the states felt strongly about, and so they passed these rules. And then, like as I mentioned, some counties and a lot of cities kind of jumped in on it as well. But it does complicate things if you are in a state where your city that you have your office in also has its own sick leave laws, because these paid sick leave rules need to be compared and contrasted. So let's say there's like 10 items or 10 things that you have to do under the sick leave laws. If 4 of those things are better at the state level, then those 4 are the things that you have to abide by. And then if the remaining 6 items are more beneficial because it's being provided by the city in some sort of way, then you have to abide by that in that scenario. So in other words, it's kind of a mishmash of rules that you have to kind of keep track of. Now, thankfully, HR for Health helps you with all of these things. They manage all of that for you when they set you up, at the local level. So you don't ever have to worry about balancing between states and city. It does all that for you. But these sick leave requirements, follow some very specific guidelines, and I'll give you a couple that you might not know about. And so it's important that you take note of this and make sure you're doing these. One is that a lot of the sick leave balance requirements, meaning how much sick leave your employees have, must either be shown on a pay stub or must be shown in some other sort of system in real time. In other words, the employee needs to be able to pull that data and find out how much sick leave time they have in real time, or alternatively, it must be provided on their pay stub, when you're issuing payroll. This is very important because many of you, if you're doing payroll right now through your accountant, or you're doing it through one of these online systems that's not tied into your clock in, clock out system, or your benefits tracking or whatnot, you're not tracking this correctly or at all. And the penalties for that are pretty significant when the question comes to accurate pay stub reporting. And so I would be careful of that. I would definitely go and check your employees' pay stubs to make sure that information is on there. Or if you don't have that, then I would talk to HR for Health about getting on the system, so at least the employees have that data on HR for Health, so that they know they know where they can go to get the paid sick leave information. So kind of keep that in mind. Now, another thing that has happened is, or another requirement that a lot of people forget about, is there are some wage notice requirements and posters that must be put into the common areas of the office regarding sick leave specifically. And so these are not necessarily things that are always included in those posters that you might buy online. So make sure you have those as well, and those need to also be posted. Now, with COVID-19, some states have made it even more complicated, and that they have created COVID-19 sick leave rules specifically for 2021. And these are rules that have been passed because of COVID. And so these apply to, sometimes to 2020, to 2021, going into potentially, in future years as well, we think, the talk is that, even though there are some expiration dates on them, that they may continue or they may be added on to the current paid sick leave laws. The point is that HR for Health can help you figure out what your state or city sick leave requirements are due to these super complex rules and guidelines. And what I would recommend is that at the end of today, there will be a phone number. If you don't know what those rules are for your city or state, just give them a call, consult with them, let them help you, at least guide you down that path. And remember, the rules that we've just talked about are only a couple of them. There are rules like you can't ask for a doctor's note, for example, in California, and I think Massachusetts too, if someone's using their sick leave hours. I mean, that's not something that anybody would normally know, of course. Everybody asks for doctor's note, but now if someone is sick, using their sick leave hours, you can't ask for those doctor's notes for those 3 days or more that you're providing. And so those are the little things that that can trip you up. So make sure, if you have questions about it, you're unsure about how to do it, just reach out to us. We're happy to help. Let's talk about holidays, right? So holidays is another type of paid time off that exists out there. But I want to kibosh a couple of myths that exist. The first thing is that there's this false sense of belief that you have to observe and pay your team for holidays. That is totally untrue. The federal government and the state governments have paid holidays, and they have federal holidays that they observe. But as a private employer, you are not obligated to observe for any holiday that you don't wish to observe. And more importantly, you don't have to pay for them, even if you do observe them. And so if you want to make your employees work on Christmas Eve, so be it. Do it. No, I'm just joking. Absolutely do not do that. Absolutely do not do that. But joking aside, you don't need to observe all the holidays. And so I'll give you a very personal example. As many of you know, my wife is a pediatric dentist, and for her, some of the major holidays are holidays that she's the busiest, and so the office is not closed. So, for example, President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, those are days that the office is absolutely open because kids are off of school and they want to be seen by their dentist on those days because they don't miss any school. But of course, she observes 4th of July, she observes Labor Day, Memorial Day, Christmas, Christmas Eve, Thanksgiving, all the New Year's, all the other ones. She observes them, and she has decided to pay for some of those days if they fall on a work day. But a lot of people close their offices those days, but they do not pay for them. And so again, that is totally up to you. You get to decide what holidays you observe, meaning the office is closed, and which one of those you decide to pay. You do not need to pay for all of them or any of them if you wish not to. And as we discussed before, whether you pay or not for them all depends on your budget, the situation with your office, and sort of where all that lies. Another myth with regard to holidays is that you have to pay your employees double pay if they work on the holiday. So this is I'm not even sure where that came from, other than maybe an employee who really wanted to be paid double for that day. But that's not the case. It's not even common practice to do that. Some employers will sort of bonus some employees if they work on a special holiday, or they'll do maybe something special for them. But it's definitely not a legal requirement to do so, even if you're open on a certain holiday. Okay. Now, why would you want to pay for holidays? Why would you maybe want to pay them a little bit more or bonus them or whatnot? Well, a couple of reasons. One, there could be in this marketplace a competitive advantage to keeping and maybe hiring really good employees because you do pay better, and you maybe take care of them better. It definitely does improve employee morale, as we'll talk about a little bit later. It is, one of the most important things, for an employee to be able to step away from the office and take some time off, just as it is for many of you. And I'll tell you, I took a week-long vacation just about 2 weeks ago after about 16 months of not going anywhere, as many of you have. And it was a little nerve-wracking, going on an airplane and traveling, for about 5 hours. But I'll tell you, that break, even though I was working a little bit, I mean, don't tell my wife, but I was doing a little bit of work here and there. But the reality is that break is important, right? It allows you to re-energize yourself, recharge your batteries, and get back to it better than ever. And the same is true for your team. It's an absolute must that occurs. Now, of course, if somebody overuses it or abuses it, you need to have policies in place in your employment manual about it. But when it comes to holidays or whatnot, it's a really good way to improve morale, but more importantly, allow you to sort of be in more of a competitive place with your employees. Now, HR for Health holiday policy allows you to define not only when you pay for holidays, but more importantly, when the employees are no longer eligible. So this allows you to save money, and a lot of employment manuals don't do this, but ours does. And what I mean by that is that if, for example, you have a full-time employee that goes part-time, if you don't have in your manual about the fact, that they may get these holidays or not, then you may end up paying for holidays for an employee that does not qualify for it, because let's say, just using the same example, they went from full-time to part-time, right? That is important, right? Or if you say that, for example, if employees are not eligible, if they have unexcused absences the day before the holiday, right? So they're turning, let's say, a holiday into a long weekend, and they pretend, to be sick or to be out or whatnot, and so as a result of that, right? As a result of that, it turns out to be, sort of an extra piece of stress for your office. Well, you may not, potentially pay for that holiday for that employee, which, further supports your idea of teamwork. More importantly, it also ensures that you have a full team, going into the holiday. So again, really, really important to make sure your policy is there. And if you have a standard policy from some of these employment manual companies or your payroll company or whatnot, I can guarantee you, they won't go as far as I just described. And it's really, really important to have that. All right, let's talk about this other topic. I get this question so much when it comes to, benefits and paid time off. And the question is, can I have different benefits for different team members, right? Can I give my favorite hygienist more time off than my least favorite hygienist, right? Or can I give my RDA, something different, than my DAs, or things of that nature? And again, there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. There's a lot of people that will say, absolutely not, and everybody has to be the same. And the reality is that, in an ideal world, right? Yes, everybody's benefits would be the same. It would be easy for you to manage, and it would be no issue at all. But the reality is that that's not always the case. People's situations are different. Some people need more, of certain benefits than others, and you want to potentially customize some of that. And so although there's no set law that requires you to give equal paid time off to all your employees, what you have to be aware of is that you don't want to be discriminatory, right? You don't want to be discriminatory. So how are you discriminatory if you do want to pay people different, give people different paid time off? Well, what I have seen in my experience is that the place this happens a lot is if you have team members that are in the same position, that you're giving different benefits to. So let me give you an example. Let's say you've got two RDAs, and one, you give 2 weeks of vacation to, and they're, let's say, have been with you for 2 years, And then another RDA that's also been with you for 2 years is only getting a week of vacation. Okay, that could definitely be problematic, right? That could definitely be problematic. And the reason is that, well, they're in the same position, they're both RDAs, and then they're also, from a tenure perspective, they've been with you more or less about the same amount of time, right? They've been the same amount of time. Now, could you have a different policy where you say, if you're an RDA and you've been with me for a year, you get 2 days. If you have been with me for 2 years, you get a week. Absolutely, of course, right? And then it's just a time-based thing. Or if you say, if you're a hygienist, you get 5 days automatically, because you're a hygienist from day one, and then in 5 years you get 2 weeks. Absolutely, but make sure you don't discriminate and you give that same benefit to all of those same employees who are in the same position. Now that again, that rule, right? That rule is very, very fact specific. So let me tell you about a recent example that happened. I had a doctor, and it was actually an optometrist. And what happened there was that they had an optician who had her husband was a fireman and was getting really great benefits. And so the optician just did not want to get the health benefits from the office. And it turned out to be worth a few $100s a month. And instead of getting the cash for it, the optician asked for some more days off. And so the doctor obliged, right? And so instead of having, and I forget the exact number of days, but I think it was, instead of having like 5 days of time off, they were getting now 7 days of paid time off or not for the year. And that was a good trade-off. And that is something that is objective. It's obvious, what you've done. You more or less horse traded. They didn't take the health insurance, so you gave more of paid time off. That scenario, that it would be hard to show discrimination because there's some logic there. But if there isn't sort of some objective reason for why you're doing what you're doing, then it could lead to trouble. Now, some of you who are clever are going to say to me, well, Ali, I have something in my documents or in my contracts or in my employment manual that says that they have to keep this information confidential and they cannot talk to one another about their benefits. Well, I can tell you that whoever told you that is wrong, because your team, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is legally protected to discuss wages and benefits, right? So in other words, under the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, who kind of does unions, and although this is not a union thing, this rule applies to all employees in the United States. They are open to discussing their wages and benefits with one another and cannot be admonished or reprimanded in any sort of way for doing so, right? Even if there's a confidentiality provision, or they pinky promised you that they wouldn't talk about it or whatever, they can talk about it and compare notes and whatnot. Now, do some of them do that? Usually not on wages, but they do on benefits and other things. But my point is that if you discriminate, there's a high likelihood that this information will come out, right? Will come out. And so you want to just be careful on how you do it. Now, how do you make sure you do it correctly? Well, as I mentioned earlier, you have an objective set of metrics that supports the allocation of the benefits. Okay, so what are some objective metrics? Well, there's the easy one is years of experience. How long have they been with you? How long are they out of school? That I think is a really good one. You could use one or the other, by the way, because how long they've been with you is very different than how long they've been out of school. So that's one. Another thing is their role in the office. If they have a management role or a supervisory role or whatnot, or if they're an administrator, they get more benefits than maybe someone who's not. Okay, so that's that. And then finally, slightly different than role is responsibilities, right? What are their responsibilities in the office? How can you, how can you differentiate them between someone else? And here's an example. We have a lot of doctors who have like a back office lead, right? So they're all RDAs, but one of them is a lead, and because she's a lead, she might get a couple bucks extra in compensation, but maybe she also gets a couple extra days of paid time off or other benefits. So that's another way you can differentiate. And by the way, those little but significant differentiations do matter, right? Absolutely do matter. So that's important to keep in mind. Now, if you do separate things, you want to customize these addendums for each team member or department. You want to make sure that each team member is very clear about what they're getting, because you may have some basic rules in your employment manual about what everyone gets, but if you start to customize some of these benefits per employee, just make sure you've got the addendums in their file, so that it's very clear that what they're getting, and then you can upload that and make sure you track it well in HR for Health. And so tip one is make sure you've got all your policies outlined in your employee handbook. Absolutely, you must do that. And if you're HR for Health customer, we'll help you do that. Two, if you have differentiations amongst team members that's different from what's in your employment handbook, make sure you create a separate policy addendum for that employee and put it in their file, right? Hugely important, hugely important. And three, right, and this is where, if you do have differentiation and customization for each employee, make sure you're tracking it correctly, right? Make sure you're tracking correctly. There's no point in doing any of this, and basically anything we're talking about tonight, if you're not tracking it correctly with time clock and benefits tracking, they must be sort of combined, because they're kind of two peas in the pod. You can't have correct benefits without correct timekeeping. And and if you're if you're not an HR for Health customer, you've got to see that in action, because it saves you hours and hours of time and confusion and stress by simply the fact that it's all automated for you. So again, hugely important, hugely important. All right, let's move to family leave a little bit. So family leave acts are becoming more and more popular across states, especially for small employers. Now, for many of you, know that the Family Medical Leave Act, that goes by the moniker FMLA, usually is for employers with 50 or more employees. That is changing. Many states are creating sort of different rules regarding it that apply to employers as low as 5 employees or more. So again, hugely important that you keep track of this. Again, if you don't know what it is in your state, make sure you reach out to us. The leader right now in this regard is California. They are changing the rules left and right. And for the first time in a long time, the federal government is starting to follow suit and take on a lot of the policies that California is initiating, and making it more of a nationwide kind of policy. So just kind of keep that in mind. As a quick summary, the FMLA says that employees can get up to 12 weeks of leave after they work for someone for 12 months. And this is to care for their spouse, their child, or their parent if they have a serious health condition, or if they can't work themselves because of their own serious health condition, which of course COVID applies. They can also use those 12 weeks if they want to bond with a new child, and that's also for adoptions or fostering children. They can also take time, for certain military deployments. Now, currently the FMLA is for 50 or more employees, but as I just mentioned, the states are coming up with their own versions of that, and it's going by very similar type of names, but they're coming up with their own versions of that apply to smaller employers. So kind of keep an eye on that. If you're in California, you already know all about this, or you should. And if you don't, just reach out to us. We'll tell you all about it. And that's important. Now, why are we trying to be proactive about all this? Well, it's really important to know how you're going to define someone's leave, before they even ask for it. And the reason I say that is because there's also this sort of misnomer or misinformation that the employee is responsible for asking a certain for a specific kind of leave, and that couldn't be farthest from the truth. You have the obligation to know kind of what kind of leave they qualify for, and to help them sort of attain that. So they don't need to know sort of what leave they're actually asking for. So keep that in mind. This is very, very important. Now, the good news is it's not all bad news in this regard. The good news is that most states right now do not require you to pay for this time out of your pocket. There's a lot of wage replacement benefits that you pay through your payroll taxes and other state taxes that kind of pay for this, including state disability leave and whatnot. So this is more about, it's not really about the cash out of your pocket, it's more about the time the employee is out of your office that makes it important. Okay, but remember, really important that you know this kind of leave. Really important that you know what the employees qualify for, and how long they get. Okay, all right, now let's talk about pregnancy leave. And so pregnancy leave is still the top case that we see at our law firm, and this is a common violation by doctors across the country. It doesn't matter what specialty you're in, whether you're a dentist, an optometrist, a veterinarian, this is common across all genres, if you will. And what happens here is part pregnancy leave discrimination and part retaliation. And the reason is because the employee informs you or your office manager or some sort of supervisor that they're pregnant, and then within a very short amount of time they get fired. Okay, and this is this is very, very common. And the reason is that a lot of times you as the employer have been wanting to let go of this employee for a while. It's not truly that they are simply saying that they're pregnant and then you're firing them. It usually is because of a number of other problems that have existed with this employee, but you haven't taken the steps to do anything about it. And once when they finally tell you that they are pregnant, it's like the thing that finally breaks the camel's back, and you decide, okay, I'm out. Like I'm gonna terminate them now. And that's where that's really where the problem starts. So make sure you absolutely do not do that. If you have any questions about terminating somebody who is pregnant or is going through that, just resist terminating them. Pick up the phone, call someone, either me or HR for Health, and let us walk you through that before you ever think about doing it. Now, a lot of states, again, partly because of COVID, partly because they just are looking for an excuse to do this. They have extended pregnancy leave requirements across at the state level. So again, the states have sort of extended their rules as a result of this, and so it's really, really important that you look at your state rules and make sure that you are carefully looking at these extended pregnancy leave requirements. We've seen in some situations the leave lasting all the way to 18 months or so, with some precautions in place. So just be careful. What you need to do from the steps, if you will, to kind of protect against pregnancy leave manipulation or abuse is, first, absolutely ask for medical certification that they're pregnant, whatnot. You can't ask for anything else. You don't want to ask about complications with their pregnancy. You don't want to ask about any other medical issues that they may be suffering, but just some sort of medical certification. And then document the time for the leave. And so there's a couple of different kinds of leave. There's intermittent leave. That's before, that's time that they take off while they're still pregnant before they deliver. And that could be, because they have to have bed rest, or this could be for a lot of different reasons. Or it could be, right after, they deliver and they need some time off because of variety of reasons. They might be, they might be disabled as a result of the delivery, or whatnot. And so you need to get a sense of when their return date is going to be, and get that in writing. If it needs to be extended, for some reason, like I said, for disability reasons or otherwise, make sure you get a doctor's note. It's not that's not the time to you know to you know to be judgy, or to kind of make comments to them, that that it's going to be super unhelpful. They're going to get their leave one way or another. So just get the doctor's note, and just sort of go from there. Make sure that you give them the necessary pamphlets and rights that your state requires you to give to pregnant employees. And then upon their return, they get the same job title, status, pay. All that needs to stay the same. So if you are a hygienist, you bring them back as a hygienist. If you're an optician, they come back as an optician. If they have a desk job, they're an insurance coordinator, for example, then you can put them in another position that's similar to that. It doesn't have to be the insurance coordinator job, but it can be something very similar to that job that they're qualified to do. As long as it's very similar, you're going to be okay. But again, remember, whatever documentation you get, put it into HR for Health. Make sure it's uploaded in there in a safe place. And by the way, I should mention this too, because we get this question a lot. Although you have to provide them with the same job title, status, pay, all those things that we were just talking about upon their return from pregnancy, that road is a two-way street. In other words, the employee also has to come back in the same job title, status, and pay. And what I mean by that is that if they had their first child and they suddenly say, you know what, I'd rather be a mom than to come back, working here 4 days a week or 5 days a week. I want to only work 2 days a week. Well, you don't necessarily have to agree to that, right? You don't necessarily have to agree to that. And so it's important for you to kind of keep that in mind. It's not something you want to do on your own. Make sure you reach out to us so that we're helping you through it, because it does need to be navigated very, very carefully. But it is a two-way street, at least in that regard. Okay, all right. Let's talk about disability leave. So what is a disability? It's a frequently asked question, because it's so amorphous, and you would think what it is until you start sort of seeing some of the things that we see. But basically, a disability is defined as a person who has some sort of physical or, and this is very important, mental impairment that substantially limits one of the major life activities that you would expect someone to be able to do. And what does that mean? Well, a major life activity is feeding themselves, bathing themselves, dressing themselves, or just overall kind of being self-sufficient. Okay, so if they have any sort of physical or mental impairment that prevents them from any of those things, then that is going to be considered a disability. Okay, and by the way, this also applies to people who maybe have a history of these impairments, right? So it's not that they're just necessarily in it right this second, but it could also be that they have a history. Now, why is this important, right? Well, because what's happened is that disability has sort of changed, especially with COVID. Before, it was a lot of physical disability that we were dealing with, a lot of injuries, on the job or off the job, right? Alcohol abuse, or alcoholism, things with marijuana, those were things that could end up becoming considered disabilities. Even severe broken bones, where somebody wasn't able to feed themselves because they broke their collarbone, or broke their legs, or hurt their vertebrae, or something of that nature. All those things could reach that level of disability. But what has happened in the last 12 months or longer now is that with COVID, we are seeing a lot more mental impairments becoming an issue. And I'll tell you, look, and we are experiencing ourselves. It's not like I'm immune to this, but there's a lot of people who kind of make up this issue as well, just because it's available and they take time off and they call it what they call it. But there is some seriousness to this, because there are a lot of people who also really are having sort of mental impairments as a result of being home and being in shelter in place for so long, not seeing family members, being stuck indoors, working from home. These are very real issues that a lot of people face. And for every bad apple, there's probably three that are really truly suffering through it. And so it's something that I want to bring up, because it's something that you have to be cognizant of, and be kind of be approaching the situation with eyes wide open, if you will. And the reason is because you have to treat those in a very similar fashion, and you must make reasonable accommodations, whether it's physical or mental limitations that may apply to this employee. And so what are those things? Well, we're going to talk about those, because part of this is this sort of interactive process. But before I get into it, reasonable accommodations, and a lot of you, I'm sure, have a lot of questions about this, is not what it seems. In other words, being, the law kind of sets a very high standard for reasonable accommodations. In other words, for you as an employer to not accommodate someone, you literally have to show that your business would shut down if you accommodated them. It's not enough for something to be an inconvenience or to be a cost, right? If somebody needed an accommodation because they needed, let's say they had a mental impairment because they're afraid of COVID, for example, and they need plexiglass in front of their desk or whatnot to work with patients. Putting that up, even if it costs a few $1,000s, that's not an undue hardship. That's considered sort of an inconvenience. And same thing applies to modifying schedules and other things, which we're going to talk about in a second. But so keep that in mind. If you ever have any questions about it, please reach out to us, because this is the kind of thing that we can help you navigate through. But let's talk about the interactive process if you do have somebody who comes to you with some sort of impairment. And I'm going to go through this, kind of in detail with you, because it is a process, but some of it is very fact specific. So this may differ a little bit from what happens if you call us and we're going through it with you. But basically, the first step is you have a conversation with the employee and really see what they need from you, right? What is it that they require? This should be an absolute open discussion. It should be not judgmental in any sort of way, and it should be really something that you hear directly from them. In my experience, employees, understand that this is sometimes, stressful on the practice. It's stressful for themselves as well, because they're going through the disability, and so it's always a good idea to ask them, what it is that they need, or they believe they need from you to accommodate them. And what's important about that is that sometimes the things that they ask for are things that, if you're having a really good open discussion with them, they will realize it's not something that you can accommodate. And I'll give you an example. Just last week, we had a hygienist who got a doctor's note that said that she could not sit for more than 5 minutes at a time. And she was asking the doctor, the practice, to, in essence, accommodate her for that. Well, as you can imagine, that's nearly impossible to do, for a hygienist to not sit for more than 5 minutes. In fact, I can't imagine a hygienist not sitting for more than 5 minutes at a time and being able to do almost anything in the office. And so could they have put her in another position, an RDA position, a DA position? Maybe. Was that something that was reasonable? Probably not, considering her skill set. And so unfortunately, in that scenario, the office could not accommodate that employee, and so she just had to be home. She wasn't fired, of course. her position's kept there. They had to replace her, but that doesn't mean that when she feels better, she's not going to have a job. She, of course, will have a job waiting for her. But you have to look at the totality of that scenario. And the great thing was that we coached this employee through the. I'm sorry, we coached the employer through this process. And what could have been a very stressful conversation turned out to be a really good one. And I can guarantee you, the employee, albeit she's, I'm sure, sad to not be in the office, did not feel as bad as she would have if the conversation had gone a totally different way. Because as far as she was concerned, the doctor tried. He sat down, talked to her, was open to the idea of accommodating her, but unfortunately, the accommodation was not something that they could do. So what do accommodations look like? Well, they can be different schedules, different work schedules. They could be different job duties if available. So you don't have to fire anybody to accommodate another employee. You don't have to create a job to accommodate another employee. You don't have to do any of those things. Different tools and equipment could be an accommodation. They might need something different to do their jobs. Again, if it's not a great cost, then that's something that you can do. And then, as I mentioned, it has to be more than just an inconvenience. It has to really be detrimental to the practice. Okay. All right. So as we end tonight, let's talk about next steps. Some really important things for you to do. So first thing is, make sure, just like those Lego pieces we were talking about in the beginning, right? You need a manual, instruction manual to help you, put those Legos together. And the same thing applies here. You need to have policies in place for all the required leaves in your state. And I can tell you that, if you are any sort of healthcare practice, the leaves that apply to you and that are standard or typical for your office are going to be very different than in many other businesses. So please reach out to us if you have any questions about that. But first thing is ensure you have policies for all your required leaves. The second thing is that make sure that you clearly communicate to your team about how leave is going to be administered, what you expect from them when they're asking for leave. Those of you who are on HR for Health, you already know how awesome of a leave request system we have in there that shows them exactly how much time they have, how much time they can use, and how much leave they will, how much time they will have left after they take their paid time off. All of that is automated for you, and so there's no guesswork. There's no doing it on paper, on Excel, like none of that nonsense. It's all sort of automated based on their time clock record, and so there's really no way of messing it up because it's done for you. So make sure you've got that, and you're outlining to them how they should be applying and asking for leave. Right? Whether you need a week notice, a month notice, how that works. Then it's important to study the leaves that are required by your state so that you know what your employees are eligible for when they start asking you for that. Now the reality is, I know most of you have lives and you don't want to become HR gurus. So with that in mind, I would say become familiar with it, right? But when you have questions, raise your hand and call us so we can answer those questions for you, or email us. Now, of course, please give us as much time as you can. Give us some advance notice. The more last minute it is, the more I think stressful it is for everyone. So give us some time to answer you, but ask us questions about the leaves. Tell us the scenario. Let us know what you're experiencing so we can answer your question and tell you what kind of leave they could be eligible for. Okay, and remember, the responsibility falls on you as the employer, not the employee. So this is all on you, and this is why HR for Health was created. I mean, quite honestly, we created this because there are so many things that you're responsible for that is so hard for you to manage. And so we've sort of made it super easy and are tracking it for you so that you don't have to worry about that. Our manual, as I've mentioned, it outlines all the benefits and leaves of absences based on your state and your practice size, because both of those matter. If you're a group practice and you have more than 25 employees, there are different rules that apply to you. If you have more than 50 employees, even more rules apply to you than if you're smaller. But there are about 95% of all the HR rules apply to small practices with 3 to 5 employees as they do with large practices. So these employment handbooks are really, really vital. For those of you that missed this early on, if you text the word paid or unpaid to 44222, I don't know why we make these texts so long and complicated, but anyways, I want to make sure you guys are paying attention. Paid or unpaid to 44222, and you'll get these required leaves that we've been talking about, broken down by state. So feel free to get that information. It's totally, there's no strings attached to it. So go ahead and put that in your records. And then finally, the reason we're doing this seminar and the reason why, this was important for us to do tonight is because leave is a really important part of your practice health and your employees' health. And as I mentioned earlier, it is a part that, as a business owner, sometimes, it's hard to swallow, because that when a valuable team member is gone from your office, that you have to replace that person, and sometimes the person you replace them with is not as good. I understand that. I go through the same scenario as many of you do. But when you kind of take a moment to step back, right? When you take a moment to step back and realize kind of what that leave really means to the employee, what it means to their overall mental health, what it means to how they interact with each other, how they interact with your patients, it's invaluable. It's invaluable. And it's funny. One of our team members at HR for Health, I was noticing that he hadn't taken a vacation for over a year, and about a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago, I told him, I was like, you absolutely need to take some time off. And of course, being who he is, he was like, yeah, I will. And only recently do I believe, I think he put in the request for it. And because that's his mentality, is all about go, 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 which I appreciate as an employer, and I'm sure all of you appreciate with regard to all of your employees, because they work so hard for you. But at the end of the day, that break is so vital. And if we've seen anything with COVID-19, is how difficult it can be to manage not only a family but also a career, and so it's really important to maintain a great team, but more importantly, to give them the opportunity to thrive by taking some time off and doing it for themselves. So I can tell you, and I know most of you are, I'm preaching to the choir here, finding and training new employees is very, very difficult these days. And so, understanding the needs of your employees, encouraging them to make sure that they're, not just their physical health, but also their mental health is a priority to you, and should be to them as well. It becomes, it pays dividends in terms of, the productivity that they bring into the office, if nothing more than just the way they interact with your patients. Because we all know, how our teams interact with the patients is so intimately tied to how that patient feels when they walk out, how they put, reviews on social media and on, other platforms. It's all about how they feel when they walk out of there. And so this is your way to tell them how much you care, by making sure you're up to speed on all these leaves, but more importantly, you're tracking it for them, so they're not guessing, right? Let's not make them feel bad about asking for a week off if they've got 2 weeks in the pipeline. Make sure they know that, and we've made that easy in the system. By the way, I'm not recommending that you necessarily let your employees take 2 weeks off. I know that would be like disastrous to your business, right? You can limit those kind of things, right? You can say, hey, everybody take a week off at a time, or take 3 days off at a time, or whatever. But make sure you have these policies in place and you're tracking them on HR for Health, so that there's no guesswork. Okay. This is a screenshot of what a time off request looks, and as you can see, it shows how much balance they have, what their cap is. This is specifically for sick leave, but this kind of shows you exactly what the employee sees when they're actually going in to put in a request. And it's pretty exciting because, when they look at this and they go, oh my gosh, I don't even have, 1 hour here. They have 0.89 of an hour. They're less likely to ask for it and put you sort of in an awkward position. But rather, when they have more time, then they put in the request and they don't feel bad about it. So, all right. So as we end, here's the moment of truth. The moment of truth is, what are you going to do next? And we've talked about mental health, we've talked about physical health, we talked about paid leave, what you're obligated to pay, what you're not obligated to do. We've talked about the importance of the employment manual and making sure all those policies are perfect in there. So make sure you absolutely get that done. And we'll, if you got one of our manuals, we will customize it for you. If any of you have any questions and you want to schedule and learn more about HR for Health, please go to that website and you can schedule a time with one of our team members so that you can learn more about your practice and help you navigate any questions you have. If you're more of a phone person and you want to call somebody, feel free to give that phone number a call, and one of our team members will call you back. But the nice thing about the scheduling is that you get to schedule it whenever you want on your off days or whatnot. So, Kim, I don't know if we can put this in the chat box, but maybe we can put it as a link so people can just click on it. That might make it a little bit easier. Yeah, so let me see if we have any questions tonight. Let me see here. I think we do. Hold on here. I'm going to open this up a little bit bigger. Oh yeah, we got lots of questions. Okay, perfect. One question is paid sick leave for every employee, even part-time employees? So yes, so paid sick leave in most states is for every employee, part-time or otherwise. It's based on the number of hours that they work. And so even if they're part-time, they will earn some hours. In California, for example, it's 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours that somebody works. You do have to track that. So again, that protects you there. The next question is, if I have a handbook, doesn't that protect me? Is that not enough? Just having a handbook is like just having a toothbrush, right? Or just having like frames without the lenses, right? It's halfway there. It's halfway there. You absolutely need an employment handbook. It's a must-have. It's your first line of defense. But if you don't have all these other things that you need, right? If you don't have a time clock system that manages time clock, you don't have a benefits tracking system, you don't have the new hire documents. I mean, something for people forget, and I'm so glad you asked this question. Something some people forget is that in some states, you need somewhere between 12 to 17 documents for every employee, in your office. You need these filled out. They need to be signed. Sometimes you need some documentation. So it's an entire kind of HR protocol that you need to make sure you're protected. And they're not hard to do. It's just there's a lot of it, and it changes over time, which is why HR for Health is able to kind of automate that, so we make it easier, so you don't have to think twice about it. We update the manuals, the documents, and whatnot whenever you need it. But there's a lot of companies that kind of sell this sort of falsehood that, oh, we'll just give you a handbook and everything else is sort of gravy. It's not the case. You need the toothbrush, you need the toothpaste, you need to floss, and you need to go see your dentist twice a year, and then you're safe, right? And the same thing applies, to a handbook. All right. Another question is, you can't ask for a doctor's note for sick leave, but with pregnancy, you say to get a doctor's note to confirm pregnancy. Yeah, I know. It's really kind of a strange thing, Kevin. You're exactly right. A lot of these rules are just nonsensical, but it is what it is. But just to reiterate, you're exactly right. If if an employee is taking time off for paid sick leave, you cannot ask for a doctor's note proving that they were out for those days that they took sick leave. Let's say that you gave them the minimum, the 3 days a week, which is the most typical. As soon as they ask for a 4th day of sick leave, so beyond the 3 days that you're required to, you can ask for a doctor's note, right? You can ask for a doctor's note. So that's okay. On the pregnancy side, it's different, right? Pregnancy, you can't, if they're using their sick leave to go see a doctor, you can't ask for a doctor's note. But if they come to you and say, hey, I'm pregnant and, please congratulate me and all this kind of stuff, then yes, you can ask for a doctor's note. And of course, you shouldn't, do it in an accusatory manner, like prove it to me that you're pregnant. No, it's like, no, that sounds great. Whenever you get a chance, give me a doctor's note, and so on and so forth, just to put it in the records, and that should be enough. Okay. Another question is, do they have to get the same day? If they work Wednesdays only, do you have to give them Wednesdays, or can you give them the same paid title on another day? So yeah, great question. So this one is a little bit up in the air. And the reason is that you're supposed to give them the same schedule, the same benefits, the same pay, and all those things. If the employee changing from, let's say in your example, Cynthia, from a Wednesday to another day is a major change for them. Let's say they don't have childcare on Wednesdays, or I'm sorry, they don't have childcare on the new day that you want to put them in, but they do have childcare on Wednesdays and that's why they're working, then no, you can't change them. But if it's inconsequential to them and you, then it could be okay. Now, my recommendation would be to have this conversation with them and see if they're okay with it, if there's not a reason why they couldn't work this other day. And with a sweet tongue, you'll probably be able to get them to agree, unless of course it's a major change for them. And in that scenario, you can't change their day either. Okay, so I hope that works for you. Let's see, is it illegal to pay for sick leave that has not been taken? No, it's not illegal to pay for sick leave that hasn't been taken. In fact, a lot of people, as sort of a perk, pay sick leave at the end of the year, and then starting in January, they renew the 3 days or whatnot that somebody is supposed to pay, and you go kind of from there. You can do it any which way you like. I actually like that idea of paying them out at the end of the year, because it's like an extra perk. They're sometimes not expecting it, and also they're not forced to take it during sometimes the busiest time of the year. We do, last year, even though it was COVID, we got a lot of calls from doctors who said, my team is taking sick leave, and it's December, it's my busiest time, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, there is really nothing you could do about it. So paying them off is not illegal. You're all good there. But remember, if you're going to do that, make sure you do it for everybody and not just your favorite employees. Okay. If an employee uses sick leave for appointments or to take their kids to appointments, should we ask for documentation? So if they're using paid sick leave, no, you should not ask for documentation during those first 3 days if you're doing the minimum. But after the 3 days of paid sick leave, you can ask for documentation. That's not a problem. Let's see, last question. Can you ask to get paid for the 3 days sick leave even though you're not sick? Yes, you can ask for it, but the employer does not have to pay you out if they don't want to. Those are, it's intended to be used if you're really sick. But as another person was asking, if a doctor wishes, they can pay you out at the end of the day. So, all right, I think that was it. All right, I think that's all we have in terms of questions. So everyone, thank you again for being here tonight. If you have any questions, please call us at that number or schedule a time to talk to one of our team members about HR for Health. Of course, you all have, I'm sure, my information. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out again. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, and we will see you at the next seminar. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Kim. Thank you.
Bye.